I believe across this country, everywhere you go, jobs is number one. You have referred to that and also to the deficit. I want to follow up on both those topics, but I want to go back to what my colleague from West Virginia was talking about, how 4 million more jobs in government than in manufacturing. You talked about that, but you cannot sustain that if the taxpayers are paying for there and the lack of manufacturing, how you be able to grow. You talked in your testimony here of unemployment being at 10%. In my state, it's higher. In my congressional districts, and higher throughout the Central Valley in California. There's some places of 40% unemployment. But even a stronger telling in there, you said 40% of the unemployed have been out of work 6 months or more, nearly double from a year ago. Now, you did say these government jobs, there are some bureaucrats, but the growth was in education and in health care. But there's got to be some common sense. But I'm trying to find where are some ways that we can create jobs quickly with low cost, rolling back regulations. But you said in your testimony here, you talked about the international, that the international was recovering. If I state it right within there, you say, international trade supported by the recovery and the economies of many of our trading partners is rebounding from its deep contraction of a year ago. Now, there are 3 trade agreements that are sitting here: Panama, Colombia, and South Korea. The President has said that if you increase U.S. exports by 1%, it would create over 250,000 jobs, and hence change the jobs we are creating from government to others. Do you agree that 1%, and they say with these 3 trade agreements, it would give you that 1%? Would it create 250,000 new jobs?
I don't know that number. I'd have to look at that number, but certainly opening up trade creates opportunities for us to export, and that ought to create jobs. I'm quite sure it would.
And it would not cost anything more, but it'd create jobs that weren't government related.
It ought to improve the division of labor between our different countries. Each country can be more productive, should raise our standard of living, and I expect would create jobs as well.
If I could just touch base on what our ranking member talked about earlier, because we've had many discussions with you in your past profession, the study of former countries and some of their downfalls. The national debt and the budget deficit. You have told us time and time again that you cannot sustain a budget deficit over 2.5% to 3% of GDP. And you stated that earlier, and I wrote down a few words that you refreshed. You said if we were able to get a fiscal exit from this, it would actually help the current recovery. Is that correct?
Yes.
Looking at the current budget that is proposed, does that reflect the commitment of changing the growth curve of our budget deficit or our national debt?
Well, as I said earlier, the projections of 4 to 7% deficits from 2013 to 2020 and increasing after that, I think everyone would agree, including the President, I think everyone would agree that that's not sustainable and that we need to address those numbers and get them down in the out years.
I heard you say that, and I'm trying to say here as a congressional member looking at a budget today, hearing your words that you have told us time and time again, and every economist says it, that you cannot sustain this. Watching our national debt of GDP go up almost to the highest level outside of World War II, especially at the end of this decade, to be 77%. What do we do today? Your quote earlier said would help the current recovery if we were able to sustain that. So looking at the current budget, does it give us the change needed in any shape or form?
Well, it's not sufficient to look at this year's budget, if that's what you mean. I mean, you have to look at the next 10 years.
Yeah, but we're sitting in a place where we vote and we look today. We all see 10 years and where it's going. We all realize that this is putting in a place that gives us great hardship. So our actions have to be now, and your comment says it helps the current recovery if we take action as well. So the current budget that I see does not give us that. And I'm asking you, do you see it as helping us in this fiscal crisis, or does it expand the deficit further?
I think it would be helpful for the current situation if the Congress and the administration, and this is very difficult, I'm not in any way minimizing how hard this is, could provide a plan which shows how the deficit will fall to this 2.5% to 3% level at least over the next 10 years. I think that would be very, I don't know exactly, which programs, what taxes, what changes you would make. That's certainly up to Congress, but a concerted effort to do that, I think would be, even a strong effort would be probably good for confidence.
It'd be good for the future, but it'd be good for the recovery. I'm not asking you to pick
Because
departments.
it would increase confidence, lower expected tax rates, lower real interest rates.
Gentleman's time is
I
expired.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.